Look at this old man right here, in a swamp full of crocodiles. This guy falls in the water and doesn't panic. He even stood up calmly, but his body was already wet. Instead, it made him very angry. But after a fire started on one side, I started to wait there, because there are many legends in the swamp, hidden in that mysterious region. And places like this are called Devil's Bogs. Troy decided to explore. Let's see if it's man-made or natural. So Troy is preparing to go. Help your friend John explore the Devil's Swamp. After all, now hunters still have no clue where it is. Troy is now on his way to John's camp. After all, his wife is very afraid of this place. As Troy arrived at the camp, immediately go up and say hello to John. He asked him about the difficulties he faced, and John will see it in the swamp. That mysterious green light and that weird sound. But there's more to it than that. And there's a big X. Curious how did that happen? But that's not the biggest mystery. There's even a notorious beast among them, also known locally as the werewolf. But it's a legend, because there's so much mystery here. John wanted to take Troy to the swamp first. After all, it's there now. Troy doesn't know anything. As the two raced through the swamp, under John's leadership, ran for almost an hour, finally arrived at the destination of the trip. Follow John's hand forward. Something also appeared in front of them. That's the big X in the swamp. Troy is under close observation. Turns out it's made of cypress trees. But this perfect big X, it still makes him think it's weird. So he decided to get off the ship first. Go to the depths of the swamp. As the two continued to deepen, suddenly I sensed something was wrong. Although the environment here is very good, but I couldn't hear any animal sounds. This makes the two very nervous. As the hunters see the big X, this is very scary. Werewolves must have some intelligence after all, but he's a beast himself. I'm sure they'll put some markers here. And this thing right here, there's a good chance the werewolf stayed. Then John pointed to another place, and that's where it was heard. Those mysterious green lights and hisses. After Troy was briefed on the situation, he and John began to leave. After all, I'm not sure about those mysterious things. Still very bad at it. Decided to go back and ask a friend for help. As the next day came, Troy at the docks again. I saw my friend the captain, with a beautiful lady Mathern. Troy said hello to him. The captain introduced him to Mathern. And this young lady is a trader. Her great-grandmother used to introduce traders. The name is not abuse. It's a professional term for a psychic. As Mathern took a book with him, he solemnly handed it to Troy. This is a guy Mathern eats with, after all, or this one's departure will become meaningless. As the three men began to move toward the swamp, it was very fast moving towards the target. And during this time, Troy, also to the two, tells the story of the difficulties we face today. And after hearing this, the captain expressed great confidence. Miss Mathern is here. None of this is a big deal. As the three men arrived at their destination, the mysterious Big X, the three men quickly got off the boat and approached. In the meantime, there's constant observation on the road. Even Miss Mathern on one side. He put his hand on a tree, start to feel the energy in it. And the other two were waiting quietly, watching Miss Mathern feel it there. Follow the hand away from the tree. Miss Mathern says it's not nice. He felt something very wrong with the tree. That left Troy a little speechless on one side. After all, this is already known. As the three men walked on, also came to an abandoned house. Looking at the barren landscape inside, three people feel this is very lonely. And then Mathern felt bad again. Then Troy suddenly saw something, picked things up right away, and handed it to Mathern. With the way she kept feeling in there, such a shocking thing.
I'm getting this feeling of a woman.
This surprised Troy. I didn't expect Miss Mathern. That's real technology. All it took was one shoe. I feel these things, with the shoes back in place, and looked inside again. It feels like she used to live here, just standing there waiting for someone. It didn't seem like a long time in there. He sat down on the ground to one side. What was drawn there in the beginning? As Miss Mathern turns the book around, they also saw a woman up there. Looks like a native. I mean, it doesn't do anything, right? But it made Troy less afraid. So I decided to practice a few more. Come here to explore with yourself. As the three began to leave, towards the end of the evening, Pork Chop, Laron, and Ronnie, also in contact with Troy. I got to Troy. As the crowd said hello, Troy began to show them, asking three people to come to the Devil's Swamp. Although this is a simple exploration, but those green lights and the werewolves in the swamp, and the mysterious sound and the big X of the two trees. This made the three people on one side a little scared, but these things still interest them. I really want to go right away. But then Troy stressed one thing. That is, you could be in a swamp for a few days or a week, with a night of nothing happening. The next day, Troy took three others, begin to enter the Devil's Swamp. Although the mystery is getting closer and closer, but a few smiles on their faces. But no less. Even after seeing a giant alligator, all became very excited. But now the crocodile season is over. This makes a few people a little uncomfortable. But now Troy suddenly says something.
Always be on your toes. You got it.
And it's as simple as that. All of a sudden, the three of them started to get a little scared as the crowd walked quietly. And look at the warning sign. For people also arrived at the destination of the trip, so they started talking about what to do next. That is to drive the boat and walk that mile, then look for a place to make camp. After listening to the people are very approved, then they put the boat into the river. After all, the rest of the road, the rest of the boat, unable to cross normally. This is the only canoe we can use, as the crowd changed ships. But hunters need to be careful. It's not crocodile season after all. Keep an eye out for giant alligators lurking in the water. But the problem is in a place like this. That's not the only thing to be careful of. And that stake in the water. After all, you can't see these things on the water. If I accidentally hit it, then be prepared to be tipped over and thrown into the water. With Troy bringing Laurent ashore, tell him to find a place where he can put the boat and take a look around here too. But then Troy had an accident. He plunged straight into the river. The ship sank with it. The other three were startled in an instant. But the good thing is people aren't too far away. Soon came to his rescue to make it safely ashore. Troy said he felt strange. It just felt like a crocodile. He capsized his own boat, but he did not attack himself, even though things are very strange. But there were no surprises, okay. And now it's on shore. Then start preparing for camp, because Troy was all wet. So he and Laren stayed and made camp and lit a fire. And Ronnie and Porkchop decide to go hunting. See if you can catch some squirrels or something. I'm out hunting though. But Ronnie still gave it to Troy and Laurent. Left a shotgun for safety, with everyone ready for anything. Ronnie and Porkchop also set out to hunt. And Troy and Porkchop are getting ready to pitch their tent. But then he said this.
You know how to put this tent together?
Good thing Troy was a Boy Scout, even though it was 50 years ago, but still haven't forgotten how to set up a tent. And Laurent had to go looking for firewood. After all, I don't know these things. But Laren, who set out alone, saw a python. This made him very surprised, but he didn't seem scared at all. Instead, he just started cutting things, and on the way to collect, suddenly heard. He quickly called out to Troy, and the sound reminded him instantly, before entering this swamp, all those mysteries Troy brought up. So he quickly put things, took it back to camp, and started a fire. And Troy also began to comfort him. I don't know about Laurent, if it makes you feel better, but look what he's doing right there. Probably still a little scared. As time slowly passes, two people who were out hunting also came back, although I don't know how the harvest. But look at that smile. Looks like we got something good. Sure enough, Ronnie picked up the two rats. Troy was very happy. After all, it looks like a disgusting nutria. It's meat. It's delicious. Although these things are also invasive species. It's causing damage to the environment here. But the inhabitants of the swamp, I like eating it very much. With Ronnie hanging it from a tree, disemboweling it. I'm going to take it to the river for cleaning. But when Ronnie was washing in there, this gave Ronnie, who was alone, another fright. The sound has been repeated several times, and it was only heard by people who were alone. No one else is responding. As the sun goes down, and the hunter's dinner is ready, as the crowd gets ready to eat. To pass this boring time, people started talking about werewolves, and a legend from back home. Ronnie's was the strangest, because he was, but when night came, if the child is still standing in the light, that will be the mysterious creature. Grab it and spank it there. And while Ronnie was listening to someone else, suddenly saw a ray of green light ahead. He quickly asked the other three if they had seen it, but no one on the court saw it. I think he's just screaming. It could be fireflies. But Ronnie, who grew up in the swamp, how could you not recognize a firefly? And that made Ronnie so scared. That's when Laurent suggested taking a look. Everyone agrees. After all, we all know Ronnie grew up in a swamp. It can't be all wrong. As the crowd put on their headlamps, the four chose to split up to explore this mysterious event. And Troy and Laurent chose the boat and set out to search. As the two keep moving forward, Laurent suddenly saw eyes. It turned out to be a crocodile. This moment makes two people very alert. Start looking around constantly, scared of what's going on around you. And Ronnie and Porkchop's on the other side, still looking for that mysterious green light. What the hell is curiosity? There is a constant glow. Then the eyes suddenly appeared again. As the two keep moving forward, he came to a house. The two immediately began to look around. The house looked very run down. Ronnie's still there saying hi, as if someone else lived here. Then they suddenly saw a shoe, and Troy found it before. The shoe that the local left behind. Then they heard the mysterious voice again. It scared Ronnie and Porkchop in an instant. He started running right away. I'm afraid to stay here any longer. And put it 3 miles away. Troy and Laurent are better off looking for something mysterious. Then suddenly they heard voices again. Quickly began to move in the direction. Suddenly there was a green light in front of them. But as the ship gets closer, did you find something glowing? Troy paddled on immediately. Then the voice came again, and it was very loud. But under Troy's observation, turns out it was an old oil well. It was very shabby. Looks like it was 70, 80 years ago. It was built right here. The way they looked at it, Troy understood everything. That light is emitted by refraction. The sound is carried by the wind. And after figuring everything out, the two also began to leave. As the four meet again in the swamp, Ronnie immediately turned to both of them, tells of the mysterious house. And Troy also to the two, said the mysterious sound and the green light. Ronnie and Pork Chop, after getting to know each other, I was instantly relaxed. So the four got ready to go back to bed, with nothing happening all night. Second day of Troy also found John from the docks, preparing to recount the mysterious events. Two people after greeting, Troy began to tell him, although we know where the green light and the sound came from, but there's no werewolf there. And that giant X, what is the reason? And John learned about it. After thanking him, they began to leave for home. Well, that's all for this program. Give it a thumbs up, and let's look forward to the next episode. These guys are really stable mentally, looking at the various treasures before us. Not only did I not get carried away, it was even very calm. It's not just crocodiles, pythons, and fish, and huge cypress trees. It's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the money is not so easy to make. After all, you don't just have to walk through that dangerous swamp. And beware of the potential dangers. There is a mysterious treasure in the swamp, but many locals are reluctant to go. And the reason is pretty simple. That's the way to it. It's full of all kinds of dangers. So Troy found two friends. Let's explore the mystery. And now Troy, I'm discussing it with Don and Kimchi, the hidden treasure. And Don just happens to know something. That treasure is in the old sawmill. But it was in 1915, by a sudden hurricane, to destroy the mill outright, even though the people there have left. But the log of the cypress is still there. And these things are very valuable, at $20,000 a piece. But this one provided the country with huge timber. It no longer exists, but hundreds of acres were cut down. But it was just right for Don. There's a map to get there. I just can't see north, south, east. After Troy took the map and looked at it, it feels like this map is really sloppy. But Troy still had ideas in his head. But this sloppy map still leaves Troy a little skeptical about the authenticity of this. But Don was talking. This is a 90-year-old man. Something for myself. I heard that and I wanted to go. It's Louisiana after all. These cut down trees. You can take it away. And think about those huge trees, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. All three now fantasize life after all that money. When the three of them have wiped the spit clean, get in the car and start moving. As the three men arrived at the dock, wondering if I can pass this one. Chance of record low water level. To find those high-value logs. After all, the water level is lower in the swamp. You can still see what's going on underwater. With all three on board, Troy will set sail immediately to earn that valuable timber. Honestly, I can't believe it. There's so much money to be made in that swamp. It's not just crocodiles and crabs and fish. And this valuable wood. When the three had driven 20 miles, Troy told Kimchi to take out the map. I started looking at the scribble right away. I'm sure this is right here. That place on the map. But Kimchi began to wonder again. After all the sloppy stuff, Troy can be so sure. But he seemed so confident. And the barren river in front of me. This is the sawmill. So Kimchi put away the map. But as the trio kept moving forward, the water level under our feet is also lower. Access to the ship branch is also becoming more difficult. But Troy was talking. Don't be afraid of such a small problem. That's not even a problem. Kimchi took out the map again, observed the final destination with Troy, and Don on the other side is just staring at it. But with Troy on the move again, Don suddenly began to be very energetic. Seems to have something to do. No longer the least useful of the three. But even in that constant effort, the ship is still going round and round. Troy quickly stopped the engine. Let Kimchi and Don stand together and push. As Troy begins again, Don and Kimchi are there too. Three people are finally out of the misery. Only they chose to go home. After all, this ship is too heavy. It's still easy to get stuck in these shallows. After 2 hours, the three changed to a hovercraft. And this is the kind of boat that can go to the shoal. With the three men hurtling through the swamp, soon back to the sea of misery. But this time it's not like the others. It's hard to move on here. On the contrary, there is no loss of speed. With the three arriving, just circled the position. Kimchi took out the scribble again. Start looking around, even though it was located 2 hours ago. But in the circle before leaving. I forgot the path. But with the trio once again setting their course, Don immediately set sail. And Troy on one side is 90% confident. Now the direction of travel. That's where we're going. But then I found out there was no water on the road ahead. It was an awkward moment for all three. But upon observation, I found there is still a path ahead. All three sat down immediately. and go back a little bit, and then just turn it all up. As the three men kept moving forward, all of a sudden, the boat is on land. I got stuck right here. Three people quickly began to discuss how to run out. But then Don found something. As the camera goes by, it turned out to be a rotten cypress tree. The three men immediately got off the boat to check it out. After the touch left and right, he put the beautiful bark on the boat. Then the two men pushed the bow out. And Don also saw the two men on board and continued to run.
Woo! Thank you, Jesus.
Their access blocked. The swampers, with some evidence of a possible sawmill nearby, retreat and regroup.
With the trio back in the deep end and began to return home. In Troy's house, the people began to discuss, how do I proceed to the next step? Although successfully through the hovercraft, arrived at the treasure site, but I still can't get into it. Then Troy suddenly remembered a weapon. It's a drone that can be piloted. You can view it through this thing. At this time, Don also said that he had this thing. There's a good chance we'll see some treasures. As the three men entered the swamp again, and it's where it got stuck. Don took out his drone too. Troy picked it up and lifted it up as Don turns the drone on and began to steer it forward. As the three men found a small piece of water, I knew right away that this was it, the lumberyard's destination. As Don controls the drone and flies around and found a way in because there were no good handling tools in the past. They dug a ditch right here, let the wood go out. Then Don suddenly saw a wooden root. Fly the drone in for a closer look right away. After observing everything, the drone is back in the air. Then the three men began to walk inside. What else can we find in here? As they get deeper, to find it had dried up. Low water this year has made it look like this. Then Troy suddenly made a discovery. Immediately called for Don and Kimchi. As the crowd approached, turns out this is a bulldozer. It was also found that it was made in 1952. And look at this bulldozer. Troy seems to have thought of something. As the three continued to go deeper, found another car. All that's left is the shell, but a closer look reveals. This car's been here for I don't know how long, and two old equipment in succession. Everyone knew that the logs were not far away. Soon the three arrived. The ditch we saw on the drone earlier, but it's just a timber highway. Not exactly what the trio were looking for. With constant progress, a huge log was found again. Looking at the size, it's worth tens of thousands of dollars. It's 40 feet long and 5 feet wide, and all those bruises. It's worth all the fun, and that made Troy believe even more. This is where the sawmill is located. But as the trio kept moving forward, came to a very disgusting place. That's the swamp. It's the swamp that can sink people into the ground. That's an instant stop for all three. Can't go any further. But the three did not want to return. After all, the logs haven't been found yet. But there is no other way. Can only return to the ship again. As an hour passed, the three also returned to the dock. And Troy figured out who to turn to. That's our old friend Cody. This doryman guy. With Troy on the line, after saying hello to Cody, he told him about his predicament and the nearest target, the sawmill. And when Doryman hears it, immediately means to wait. He brought the swamp wagon the next day. After all, it's too late now. Take care of your spirit. With a night of nothing happening, the sun rises on a new day. Old friend Cody Doryman, and with three of them headed for their destination. With Cody driving around like a tank, galloping down that bumpy road. No, there's no road. But under the weight of Cody, flat grassland appeared behind. But then Troy said, the car is a little small. Sitting in the back keeps getting cut by branches. Of course, Don feels worse than Troy. He was wearing a vest, after all. Then the four suddenly found something. Get out of the car and check it out. Get close and look at the log. Doryman also confirmed what Troy said. I'm looking at about a dozen feet of logs. The four believe it must be worth tens of thousands of dollars. As the crowd moves on again, people began to get hurt by the branches. But this time it didn't last. You stop the car again, start looking for the sword music. But this is moving through the swamp. It's very dangerous. Can only move forward carefully and keep moving forward. And this situation arises because of the dead leaves, plus all that soft ground. Makes it very easy to get caught up in. But Don is a very good man, still moving forward. Three others watched from behind. But the iron-headed Don is still very lucky and walked back to land again. But Don found another ditch. This pleased the three men in the back because it represents logs. That's one step closer to four. So keep going though. But there's no way to walk. As the trio began to return to the car, But Don was still there checking the depth of the ditch. With the four successfully finding their way, Cody is also leading three others forward. But moving forward is very difficult. I even got stuck in it. So Cody started going backwards. But even if we go back the same way, but going backwards is still hard. So the other three people in the car started to get down. Leave Cody alone to go backwards. But even that was difficult. This made Troy hurry to change direction. But Cody turned a deaf ear. I'm still doing what I'm trying to do. I just didn't expect Cody to be in a place like this. Success regressed out. The other three saw it. Get back in the car right away. Cody also walked forward again, with the three men successfully leaving the swamp. The hunters are back on land. But then Troy found the wood. The four immediately got out of the car and approached. In huge trees like this, there are so many. There are even logs up to 9 feet wide. This makes the four people very happy. I never imagined such a big tree. That's how you survived every hurricane. And here it stands, and it even reached a height of 40 feet. I have no idea how much this thing is worth, although people are very surprised by this thing. But it hasn't gone to my head yet, so I chose a fallen log. Cody quickly pulled the rope out of the front. Don's getting it and tying it up with the rope wrapped around the tree. Cody started backing up right away. In the constant pull down, logs were also pulled out, but then the rope snapped. This made the four people very surprised. After all, you can pull 10,000 pounds of stuff. And now there's nothing to be done. So the four decided to leave a mark here. Then wait until next spring. When these places are flooded again, you can come back and haul it away on the boat. But now Troy was worried about something else. That's if you pull out some logs, there will be another gold rush. People will destroy everything here. So the hunters decided, keep this place a secret for now, until we clean this thing up, after the discussion, and began to prepare to go home. I have to say, the American people, that's taking capitalism to the end. As the next day came, the three hunters were together again. They decided before they left. We're redoing it at Troy's house. Recap the events of the last few days. Although, in this one adventure, very fun and exciting, but Don still hated the trip. Clothes get dirty all the time after all. Well, that's all for this program. Give it a thumbs up, and let's look forward to the next episode.